Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Peace be upon you. An explosive device detonated when a U.S. military convoy drove over it in central Baghdad, destroying a military armory. Meanwhile, a U.S. Army spokesman confirmed that the explosion, which claimed the life of an Iraqi and wounded 8 others, may be due to a gas tank explosion, setting 2 neighboring residential buildings on fire in Baghdad's old neighborhood. The spokesman added that the incident is under investigation to determine the causes of the explosion. This incident increases tension in the city rattled by a wave of suicide operations this week. The United Nations demanded that their foreign employees temporarily leave Iraq for review of future plans in the country. This coincides with the International Committee of the Red Cross's decision to reduce the number of their foreign employees in Iraq and increase security measures for their local employees. Humanitarian and international organizations are re-evaluating their presence in Iraq due to the recent chain of attacks against their offices in Baghdad. The latest attack was against the International Committee of the Red Cross's office last Monday, killing 12 employees. For the first time, the Israeli police is interrogating Prime Minister Ariel Sharon concerning 2 financial scandals which may affect Sharon's popularity. The police is investigating Sharon and his 2 sons about a $1.5 million loan given by a businessman close to Sharon's family. The judicial authorities say that the loan funded illegal contributions to Sharon's election campaign for Likud party leader in 1999. The U.S. Department of Defense accuses the former vice chairman of the Iraqi Revolutionary Command Council, Ezzat Ibrahim of coordinating the attacks in Iraq. Al-Durri worked with the ousted Iraqi President Saddam Hussein for many years, disappearing after the U.S. forces took control of Baghdad.
The Pentagon suspects that General Ezzat Ibrahim is coordinating the attacks in Iraq. He is the 6th name on the U.S. most wanted list of Iraqi figures. During Saddam Hussein's rule, Ibrahim was known for his strong statements and for putting down the opposition.
We believe that these attacks are supported by the remnants of the previous regime. Ezzat Ibrahim was responsible for these attacks because in the past days of the previous regime, he communicated with radical and fundamentalist organizations.
Ezzat Ibrahim, Taha Yassin Ramadan, who is currently detained by the Americans, and Saddam Hussein are the trio that remained alive from the group of organizers of the 1968 revolution, bringing the Ba'ath Party into power. Ezzat Ibrahim survived several purges within the regime, indicating that he is favored by Saddam Hussein. Ezzat Ibrahim represented the Sunni right wing in the Ba'ath leadership, using government money to finance fundamentalist religious institutions. Observers believe that he is the one who encouraged Saddam Hussein to launch the Faith campaign in 1992. Ibrahim also funded a number of Sunni schools and charity organizations.
To my knowledge, Ezzat Ibrahim is sick and in bed. That is what I'm hearing on our broadcasts and other international sources. He stole a lot of money and can recruit many people to do these terrorist operations.
After the Second Gulf War, Saddam stopped traveling outside Iraq. Therefore, Ezzat Ibrahim was the one who regularly represented Iraq in all of the Arab and Islamic summits. With orders from Saddam, Ezzat Ibrahim met with members of the exiled opposition in 2002, promising to pardon them, marking a strange event in his political life. In 1988, Ibrahim was a member of the Council on Northern Iraq, where he used chemical weapons against the Kurds. After the liberation of Kuwait, he established the special courts to crush the Shiite uprising in the areas of the Al-Amara southwest of Baghdad. In 1988, he miraculously escaped a bombing in Karbala. Ezzat Ibrahim, the former vice chairman of the Revolutionary Command Council, the highest-ranking position in the Iraqi leadership, was born in 1942 in the city of Al-Dura, thus his title, Al-Duri. He was ranked as a military general without receiving higher military or academic training.
On another issue, the Israeli police is questioning Prime Minister Ariel Sharon about the financial scandals linked to his sons. To summarize, Sharon received a loan for $1.5 million from a businessman. Judicial authorities accuse him of using the money to make illegal contributions to his campaign for the election of the Likud party leaders in 1999. The scandal has shaken the Likud party, and according to the latest opinion polls in Israel, it has damaged Sharon's reputation. Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon cancelled all his appointments and activities to answer questions by the Israeli police about the illegal financing of the Likud election campaigns and financial violations linked to his sons, Omri and Gilad. Sharon denies having been involved in any wrongdoing in the two accusations brought against him. The first issue is linked to a loan in the amount of $1.5 million Sharon received from a South African businessman, Cyril Kerin, who is his personal friend. Omri, the son of the Prime Minister, became involved by obtaining this amount to illegally finance campaigns for the primary elections within the Likud in 1999. From his side, businessman Kerin denied that his loan was used for political ends, claiming that it was a gift to Sharon to improve his farm. The second issue which Sharon must answer is linked to his youngest son, Gilad, who is accused of receiving a large bribe from Israeli businessman David Apple, who wanted to obtain permission from Ariel Sharon, who was then the foreign minister, for a contract linked to an important tourism project on a Greek island. Since the financial scandal of Sharon and his sons was exposed, the Prime Minister tried to stall and save himself by referring police questions to his sons and denying accusations, saying that the whole situation was created by dirty rumors about his family. According to opinion polls in Israel, Sharon's reputation has been damaged. He is the third Prime Minister in Israel to be interrogated by the police. Before him, Benjamin Netanyahu and Ehud Barak were also questioned on issues that were later dropped. Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon said that Israel is ready to recognize a Palestinian state with provisional borders, and in the third stage of the roadmap, Israel would be ready to negotiate the issue of settlements. Sharon gave a speech to 170 parliament members from 24 European countries. Our reporter Eli Nissan said that the Prime Minister is willing to make accommodations to the Palestinians, but whenever Israel does that, terrorist operations increase in the area. Sharon confirmed that Israel is fighting terrorism, not Islam, and added that Israel does not plan to get rid of Arafat, despite his responsibility for the killings of thousands of Israeli citizens.
Israel would be willing to recognize a Palestinian state with provisional borders. Finally, the third phase calls for discussions on final status issues like settlements, like borders, and security zones. This plan offers everything: a real war on terror and a political horizon, but it will succeed only if there is performance. Years of speeches and statements have achieved nothing. To date, the Palestinian Authority has done nothing to fight terror and uproot its infrastructure. I'm willing to make painful concessions for the sake of peace, but I cannot and will not compromise on the security of our citizens. We need you to play an active and practical role in the fight against terror and the Palestinian terrorist groups. Their European sources of funding and other assets must be frozen. Taking action means saving innocent lives. And we need your ongoing pressure on Syria, Iran, and the terrorist groups they sponsor, such as Hezbollah.
Dozens of Palestinian families are experiencing extreme hardship in the holy month of Ramadan. Since the Zionist occupation forces destroyed their homes, Palestinians have been living without food, shelter, or medicine. In Rafah City in northern Gaza, dozens of unfortunate Palestinian families whose homes were destroyed by the Zionist occupation forces were transformed into refugees. They are now living in sports clubs, public hallways, and tents that were erected on the top of the rubble of their homes. They are experiencing extreme hardship in the holy month of Ramadan.
Our living situation is the worst we have ever experienced. We have no home, jobs, or money. There are 43 of us, including my sons and grandsons, and we don't know what to do. There are no restrooms, and we are living on an open field under the sky. We're living in a tent with no privacy. We are asking the world to look at our situation. We need homes.
We are not feeling the spirit of Ramadan. Yesterday we heard the call for breaking the fast, but I swear to God we had no food to cook and no dough to bake. Our refrigerator is empty. We don't even have a single tomato.
These images bring the catastrophe of 1948 back to the memory of Palestinians who are still suffering. The pain of that catastrophe is still living in their minds, whether they are living in Palestine or abroad. Now, the new Palestinian refugees in Rafah live without homes. They are transformed into hungry, needy, and humiliated refugees, experiencing extreme shortages of life's simple necessities.
Look at my clothes. I have no water to wash myself for prayers. There's no water. There's nothing. Where is the world?
There's no water. There's no electricity or light. There are no restrooms. No one even bothers to say good evening to us.
These new refugees are experiencing a heartbreaking situation, but no humanitarian organization bothers to provide them with suitable shelter to protect them from the cold winds blowing from the Sinai desert. In their tents, they still hear the sound of Israeli bullets, as if they are being asked to disappear from the face of the earth. Some of the Palestinian refugees live in tents, others live in public hallways and sports clubs, suffering from shortages of everything. We fail to find proper words to describe the magnitude of their suffering. Mustafa Abdel Hadi, Al Alam Television, in front of a sports club, now used as shelter for some of the new Palestinian refugees. Rafah City, Palestine.
debate is going on between the Israeli occupation army and government over how to deal with the challenging Palestinian intifada. Israeli Chief of Staff Moshe Ya'alon criticized the government's so-called security policies towards the Palestinians. Meanwhile, many more resistance operations are anticipated after Israeli occupation forces killed a Palestinian child in the West Bank and destroyed a house in the Gaza Strip.
As the Intifada continues to challenge the occupation, a row surfaced between the Israeli government and the army. The criticism of the Chief of Staff Moshe Ya'alon over the government's so-called security policies towards the Palestinians was seen by many as exceeding his powers. Ministers like Ehud Olmert say that Ya'alon can object to the situation, but not in such resounding fashion. Sources close to Israeli Premier Ariel Sharon said that Ya'alon lambasted the government Tuesday for acting harshly with former Palestinian Premier Mahmoud Abbas. Once again, Olmert said this might be true, but still Abu Mazen and his Security Minister Mohammed Dahlan failed to fight so-called terrorism. The Chief of Staff has also been at loggerheads with Defense Minister Shaul Mofaz. Ya'alon made calls for easing restrictions on quiet parts of the Palestinian territories. This, he says, would diminish Palestinian resistance operations. According to the Israeli media, Mofaz summoned Ya'alon over his comments. As the right-wing minister sided against Ya'alon, the leftists took his side. Former Labour leader and premiership candidate Amram Mitzna said that without any political prospects, the Israeli army's operations in the territories do not bring security. Israel's raids and killings continue to this very minute. The occupation forces killed a 12-year-old Palestinian boy Wednesday night in the Balata refugee camp just outside Nablus in the West Bank city. Baha''s baby was shot in the stomach as he threw rocks at an armored vehicle and jeeps that were driving through the camp. The Gaza Strip, still living through the aftermath of Israel's latest raids, was in no better situation. The occupation army raided Rafah late Wednesday, destroying a Palestinian house. Bulldozers had penetrated some 200 meters into the town. 2 Palestinians were also arrested at an Israeli military checkpoint close to Deir al-Balah, while 2 others were hit by Israeli gunfire. Such attacks have been the main cause for Palestinian resistance operations. The Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades, which claimed responsibility for injuring 2 Jewish settlers traveling in a car in the northern West Bank, said the group would not stop attacks against anyone intruding Palestinian land. Palestinian Prime Minister Ahmed Quraya has been trying to discuss with the resistance factions prospects for a truce with Israel. He said he would pursue the course of dialogue with the resistance groups. Quraya said he is ready to go to Gaza and meet the groups, but did not specify a date.
Yes, I think there are messages from Hamas. Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, in a very positive, constructive way. Ismail Haniyeh, he speaks in a very constructive way. I speak in a very constructive way. Therefore, we are speaking constructive. Therefore, there is a possibility to talk together, concrete, and to have a good understanding.
The Palestinian premier dismissed talks of Israeli or American guarantees, but rather he demanded for Palestinian ones to reach a ceasefire. He said the Palestinian guarantees will pave the way for achieving a ceasefire, but many see Quraya's attempts as a move to widen his popularity among Palestinians.
And now we return to our report on the latest developments in Iraq.
Removing debris and fixing what Monday's explosion caused in and around the International Committee of the Red Cross in Baghdad was the scene that reflected the Swiss-based organization's decision not to abandon Iraq, but to cut back its foreign staff there.
We owe it to all of our colleagues in Iraq to think of their security as a priority. It is a responsibility of ours. For this reason, we are reducing the number of our international staff and implementing additional measures to increase security for our remaining staff. And to make this clear and to avoid any misunderstanding, the ICRC is not withdrawing from Iraq.
Iraqi Governing Council member and head of the Supreme Assembly for the Islamic Revolution in Iraq, Sayyid Abdulaziz al-Hakim, blamed the wave of violence on the U.S. occupation forces. He said military power alone could not bring peace and security to Iraq and called for the establishment of national security forces as soon as possible.
The real problem affecting Iraq is the wrong policy adopted by the occupation forces. They are using military power to maintain security and peace. But it is impossible to maintain security through military power in any part of the world. We, the governing council members, believe that Iraqis should be given the authority to maintain security in Iraqi cities, and Iraqi security and military formations should be set up as soon as possible.
Meanwhile, the cycle of anti-occupation attacks and counterattacks continued. A Polish military convoy came under fire Thursday from unidentified attackers some 35 kilometers from the holy city of Karbala. Iraqi police, meanwhile, foiled a hand grenade attack on their station a few hundred meters from the US-led occupation's headquarters. In earlier attacks, 2 US troops were killed and another one injured Wednesday when an M1 Abrams tank was disabled by a roadside explosion in the Iraqi town of Balad. It was the first time an unknown planted explosion causes this extent of damage to a main battle tank, in a clear indication to the growing effectiveness of the anti-US attacks. Elsewhere, 2 mortar rounds were fired on a hospital regularly visited by US troops in the northern oil center of Kirkuk. No damages or casualties were reported. In the northeastern town of Baquba, 3 Iraqis speaking from their hospital beds said that they were wounded by mortar rounds that landed in a residential zone and a parking lot. Meanwhile, US occupation soldiers and Iraqi police carried out a joint raid in Mosul's Hayy Tanak district in search of suspected guerrillas and weapons caches. However, no arrests were made in the raids. Occupation forces also carried out arrests in Saddam Hussein's hometown of Tikrit, searching for what they call terrorist cell networks, and detained 10 suspects for questioning. The Pentagon announced that it suspects former Iraqi Vice President Ezzat Ibrahim of coordinating attacks in Iraq by foreign fighters and Saddam loyalists. A Pentagon official said the announcement probably came from the recent capture in Mosul of a former secretary of Ad-Duri and 2 senior members of Ansar al-Islam who were close to the general. Since US President George W. Bush announced on May 1st the end of major combat in occupied Iraq, 116 US troops were killed in attacks, surpassing the 115 soldiers killed during the invasion of Iraq. Bush's controversial announcement came aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, where a large blue banner reading "Mission Accomplished" served as the backdrop. The banner has since become a focus for critiques of the president's handling of the aftermath of the war, who say it illustrates his failure to prepare the American people for the US casualties suffered since then.
Israeli forces deployed their forces Thursday in the northern neighborhoods of occupied Jerusalem and the neighboring towns, aimed at preventing citizens from reaching the Holy Aqsa for performing prayers. Eyewitnesses said occupation soldiers deployed between Lower Bet Hanina and Upper Bet Hanina, located within Jerusalem borders. They also deployed in the Bari district and the Ram, north of occupied Jerusalem. Israeli forces started since 2 days surveying a number of villages in Ramallah and Al-Biri Governorate for building an isolating wall on the eastern and western sides of these villages. The survey included Midya, Na'alin, Qubya, Badras, and Shikba villages. The Israeli army closed on Thursday the southern entrance of Ramallah and Al-Biri with a military roadblock for a number of hours and thoroughly searched citizens and vehicles. Eyewitnesses said the occupation soldiers closed Al-Biri Qarandia General Road near the junction of Kafr Aqab and Smiramis. Occupation forces demolished on Wednesday evening a house of martyr Samir Abu Saud in the Salam neighborhood south of Rafah. Citizens' homes in Tal al-Sultan area west of Rafah were subject to shelling with heavy machine guns by occupation forces, injuring 4 citizens, 1 seriously, and causing damage to 10 other homes. In Jenin, Israeli forces arrested on Thursday at dawn 2 citizens from the town of Jabal. Israeli forces closed on Thursday Bethlehem Governorate completely and prevented citizens' movement between the areas. Governor of Bethlehem, Colonel Ismail Faraj, said that these measures took place while the citizens' daily suffering increases, particularly in the holy month of Ramadan.
2 American soldiers were killed today in Baquba and 3 others in a mine explosion northeast of Baghdad. More in the following.
2 American soldiers were killed in an attack in Baquba in the center of Iraq. 2 other soldiers were killed and the third was wounded yesterday at a distance of 40 kilometers northeast of Balad in an explosion in their convoy, according to an American military spokesman. 3 other American soldiers were wounded today in a mine explosion northeast of Baghdad, according to eyewitnesses. On its part, the Red Cross International Committee decided to remain in Iraq, but it reduced its personnel. This was declared by the Red Cross Director, Pierre Caron-Paul. This decision was taken in the wake of the explosion that took place last Monday against a Red Cross headquarters in Baghdad, which killed 11 people, 2 of them from the Red Cross personnel, and wounded 22 others. The United Nations also reduced the number of its staff in Baghdad after the 9th of August attack against the UN office in the Iraqi capital, which caused 22 people to be killed. Meanwhile, member of the Iraqi ruling council, Abdulaziz al-Hakim, commented on the security situation in Iraq following the Red Cross attack, saying that safeguarding security there should be the responsibility of the Iraqis themselves and the various Iraqi cities.
1,000 South Korean workers today organized a demonstration to protest the dispatch of South Korean forces to Iraq. According to the French news agency and eyewitnesses, the demonstrators gathered at the invitation of the Korean Workers' Trade Unions Federation, one of the strongest labor organizations in the country. The protest lasted for an hour in the center of the capital before turning into a riot with the police, causing several citizens to be injured from both sides. The South Korean government has approved the dispatch of about 700 soldiers to serve in Iraq. 1 Palestinian was killed today and scores were injured in new Israeli terrorist attacks against Palestinian houses in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip.
Israeli occupation forces continued their terrorist policy against the Palestinian people as Israeli Apache helicopters launched 2 missiles against a Palestinian house in Jenin. In Gaza Strip, 1 Palestinian citizen was killed and another was wounded when Israeli soldiers opened fire at them near Al-Mintar crossing east of Gaza. Another citizen died of wounds he sustained 10 days ago during an Israeli air raid on Ansarat camp in Gaza. The Israeli aggression targeted the city of Rafah, wounding 4 citizens, 1 seriously in Tal al-Sultan neighborhood. During their incursion into Khan Yunis, Israeli tanks and bulldozers demolished a house and devastated wide areas of agricultural land. In the West Bank, Israeli troops arrested 15 people in different parts of the occupied territories. Occupation sources announced that they will close Ya'bud Secondary School in Jenin, in which 482 students take classes, under the pretext that the students throw stones at Israeli military patrols. 2 Israeli settlers were wounded near Kadim settlement when their car was exposed to fire. Meanwhile, as Palestinian Prime Minister Ahmad Qurayh announced that the Palestinian factions agreed to resume negotiations with the Palestinian Authority regarding a truce and putting an end to attacks on Israelis, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Richard Armitage ruled out the possibility of reaching a settlement between the Israelis and the Palestinians in the near future, describing the roadmap as being so complex. Armitage pointed out that his country is waiting the formation of Qurayh's government to see if this government is ready to implement the roadmap.
Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.